The weakest horse on the farm was pushed aside while everyone laughed and said he was worth nothing. The farmer tried to defend him but was publicly humiliated until his son stepped forward, looked at the animal, and said something no one expected. The farmer's hands began to tremble, and the entire farm fell into absolute silence. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where in the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you everything. That's your last $500, Hank. You understand that, right? The man holding the lead rope did not look at Hank Miller. He stared at a point over Hank's shoulder, at the dry brown fields. The horse beside him was all sharp angles and trembling skin. Its head hung low. Hank took the rope. The paper bills in his other hand felt thin. I understand. A loud laugh cut the quiet morning. Dale Cooper leaned against the fence, a piece of straw between his teeth. Let me get this straight. The bank's about to take your land, your crops are dust, and you bought that asterisk. Hank did not turn around. He focused on the horse. It flinched when he moved his hand. It's a horse, Dale, Hank said, his voice flat. That ain't a horse, Hank. That's a collection of problems wearing a hide, Dale said. He pushed off the fence and walked over. The other farmhand, Rusty Jenkins, followed quietly, wiping his greasy hands on his pants. He's got a point, boss, Rusty said, his voice softer. He didn't like meeting Hank's eyes. That animal looks spooked by its own shadow. Can't be more than 3 years old and already used up. Hank's jaw tightened. He had seen the horse in the back of the trailer at the sale yard, scared, alone. It had looked at him, and for a second, Hank didn't see a broken animal. He saw something else. Something that reminded him of his own tired land, something that just needed a chance no one else would give. His name is Thunder, Hank said. This made Dale laugh even harder. Thunder? That thing couldn't make a sound if it tried. What are you gonna do with him, Hank? He can't pull a plow. He's too scared to be near a cow. You spent your last good money on a pet. The words hung in the hot, still air. They felt true. The farm was dying. 2 years with no real rain. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. His wife Sarah had been gone for a year, and with her went the farm's laughter and its light. Hope was a word for other people. Hank had just traded his last cash for a living, breathing mistake. He felt a flush of shame heat his neck. Dale's laughter was like sand in a wound. From the porch of the old farmhouse, 14-year-old Caleb watched. He saw his father's stiff back. He saw the men circling like birds waiting for something to die. His heart hurt. He remembered his mother's voice. Your father feels everything, Caleb. He just doesn't know how to say it. Caleb stood up. He walked down the porch steps, across the dusty yard, into the circle of men. No one noticed him at first. Then he walked right up to the scrawny horse. The horse shivered, its eyes wide with white rings. Careful, boy, Rusty said gently. He's liable to kick. Caleb did not listen. He raised a small hand, moving slowly. He placed his palm on the horse's neck. The skin was warm and twitched under his touch. Hey, Caleb whispered, so low only the horse could hear. It's okay. He turned to look at his father. Hank's face was a mask of defeat. You are right, Dad, Caleb said, his young voice clear in the quiet. The laughter from Dale stopped, caught by surprise. Hank stared at his son. He is worth more, Caleb continued. He kept his hand on the horse's neck, because you bought him to save him. Caleb then looked at Dale and Rusty. His gaze was not angry, it was just sure. They just want to break things. The air changed. Dale's smirk faded. Rusty looked down at his boots, suddenly interested in the dirt. The horse, Thunder, let out a soft, warm breath. He turned his head. He gently rested his heavy head on Caleb's thin shoulder. He closed his eyes. It was a small thing, a tired animal leaning on a boy. But for Hank, the world tilted. He saw his son, standing straight. He saw the horse trusting him. He saw the men with nothing left to say. In that instant, the shame didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else. A tiny, stubborn spark. Hank cleared his throat, a rough sound. Dale, Rusty, the south fence line is sagging. Go check it. It was not an invitation. It was an order. The two farmhands exchanged a look. Dale shook his head with a final snort and walked away. Rusty followed after a moment. Father and son were left alone with the horse. Caleb, Hank began, but the words got stuck. He wanted to say thank you. He wanted to say he was sorry. He wanted to explain why he bought a useless horse with their last money. He said none of it. "I will take care of him, Dad," Caleb said, understanding the silence. He rubbed the horse's nose. "I'll get him strong." Hank just nodded. "Last money." He said none of it. "I will take care of him, Dad," Caleb said, understanding the silence. He rubbed the horse's nose. "I'll get him strong." Hank just nodded. He looked from his son's determined face to the vast dry land that was his life's work. It was dying. He had no water, no money, and now a skinny horse. But as he walked back to the empty house, the weight on his shoulders felt a fraction lighter. He did not know why. It made no sense. On the porch, he stopped and looked back. Caleb was leading Thunder slowly toward the old barn, talking to him in a low, steady voice. The boy and the broken animal moving together through the dust. The morning sun was already hot when Caleb slid open the heavy barn door. Thunder stood in the corner of his stall, head low. "Just me," Caleb said, his voice soft. He had an apple from the old tree behind the house. He held it flat on his palm and waited. Thunder's nostrils flared. He took one step, then another. His neck stretched out, but his body was ready to jump back. He took the apple with a quick nip, then retreated to chew. "That's okay," Caleb said. "No hurry." Every day was the same slow dance. Caleb would come in quietly. He would talk about nothing, the color of the sky, the crack in the feed bucket, a memory of his mother. Even to brush away a fly made him freeze. The sound of Dale's loud voice from outside the barn made him tremble. "You're not weak," Caleb whispered one afternoon, sitting on a stool outside the stall. Thunder was watching him. "You're just remembering something bad. I remember bad things too." Hank watched from the doorway sometimes. He saw his son's patience. It was a quiet, steady thing, like water wearing down stone. It made his own chest ache. Sarah had been like that. She could calm a scared calf or a worried neighbor with the same gentle presence. One evening, Hank stood by the fence as Caleb led Thunder from the barn to the small corral. He didn't use a rope. He just walked, and the horse followed a few steps behind. "He's following you," Hank said. Caleb nodded. "He chooses to. It's better that way." Hank grunted. He wanted to say something more. He wanted to ask how the boy knew what to do. Instead, he said, "Water trough in the north pasture is cracked. When you're done here, take a look." "I will," Caleb said. Hank started to walk away, then stopped. "Your mother, she would have liked him." Caleb's head snapped up. His father never talked about her first. It was always Caleb who mentioned her. "I know," Caleb said softly. Hank just nodded, the words all used up. He walked toward the empty fields, his shoulders bent. Days turned into weeks. The land got drier. The sky was a hard blue bowl with no clouds. One afternoon, Rusty was fixing the hitch on the old wagon near the barn. He saw Caleb trying to put a halter on Thunder. The horse kept pulling his head away, his breathing fast. "You gotta be firmer with him, kid," Rusty said, not unkindly. "He's gotta learn who's boss." Caleb shook his head. "Then he'll just be scared of me. I don't want him to be scared." Rusty wiped his hands on a rag. "Sometimes fear is what gets the job done." "What job?" Caleb asked, looking straight at Rusty. "There's no crops to haul. There's no fields to plow. What job is there right now, except to not give up?" Rusty didn't have an answer. He looked at the boy's serious face and felt a pang of something like shame. He went back to his wrench, the metal clicking in the quiet. Later, Caleb had an idea. He left the halter on the fence post. He went into the barn and came out with a brush. He stood near Thunder and started brushing his own arm slowly. "See? It's just a brush." He moved closer, showing the horse. He touched the brush to Thunder's shoulder, one light stroke. The horse flinched but stood still. Caleb did it again and again. Soon, Thunder's head lowered a little. His muscles relaxed under the rhythm of the brushing. From the kitchen window, Hank saw it all. He saw the trust being built, one small touch at a time. He saw Sarah in the careful way his son moved. The grief hit him then, fresh and sharp. He missed her so much it was a physical pain. He looked at his failing farm, and all he could think was that he was letting her down, letting Caleb down. He turned from the window. He could not watch anymore. The sight of his son's quiet success only made his own failure feel heavier. That night, after a silent dinner, Caleb went to check on Thunder one last time. Hank sat alone at the table. The farm's account book was open in front of him, a list of numbers that all ended in red. He closed the book. He did not need to look. He walked onto the porch. The air was cool now. He could see the light from a lantern moving in the barn. Caleb was in there, probably just talking to that horse. Hank leaned against a post. A part of him wanted to go down there, to sit with his son in the quiet barn, to ask him how he did it, how he kept going when everything was broken. But a bigger part, the part made of pride and fear, kept him rooted to the spot. Asking for help, even from his own son, felt like admitting defeat. It felt like failing his father, and his father's father, who never asked for anything from anybody. He heard the barn door slide shut. He saw the small figure of his son walk back to the house, the lantern light swinging. The boy was doing the work. The man was stuck on the porch, watching his world turn to dust. Caleb came up the steps. "He's good for the night?" "Good," Hank said. Caleb paused at the door. "Dad, we'll figure it out." Hank wanted to believe him. With all his heart, he wanted to. All he could manage was a rough, "Get some sleep, son." He stayed on the porch long after Caleb went inside. He looked at the dark shape of the barn where the scrawny horse slept, no longer trembling. He looked at the fields he could not save. He felt the crushing weight of tomorrow, and the day after that, with no rain and no money and no plan. The only thing that wasn't breaking was the bond growing in his barn, and he didn't know if that was enough. The sound of the screen door slamming shut echoed across the quiet yard. Hank walked toward the fields, his steps slow. From the shade of the equipment shed, Dale Cooper watched him go. He spat a stream of brown tobacco juice into the dust. "Look at him," Dale said, "walking in circles, like a ghost on his own land." Rusty Jenkins was nearby, sorting through a toolbox. He didn't look up. "He's carrying a heavy load, Dale. The drought, the boy, losing Sarah. Carrying a load doesn't put food on the table," Dale said, his voice sharp. "Faith doesn't fix a pump. That horse was the final straw. The man's broken his head and in his pocket. We're sitting on a sinking ship." Rusty finally looked over. "What are you saying?" Dale moved closer, lowering his voice. "I'm saying it's time we get paid for our years of work here, before there's nothing left to get. Hank can't pay us, you know that." "Not Hank." Dale glanced around to make sure they were alone. "AgriWest, the big corporate farm over near Livingston. Their man, Mr. Clay, approached me last week." Rusty's face went still. "Approached you for what?" "For the water rights, Rusty. The legal permission to use the water under this land. Hank owns them, but he could sell them. With the drought, AgriWest is buying up every water right they can. They'll pay. A lot." Rusty stood up, wiping his hands nervously on his jeans. "Sell the water rights? That's the lifeblood of the farm. If you sell those, this land is just dirt. You can't grow nothing. You can't water livestock. It's worthless." "It's already worthless," Dale hissed. "Look at it. It's dead dirt. Hank is too proud to see it. He's gonna hold on until the bank takes it all and we get nothing. Nothing for our work. Nothing to start over with. This way, we convince him to sell. Mr. Clay said he'd give us a finder's fee, a cut for making the deal happen. Enough money for a fresh start somewhere that ain't dust." Rusty's mind raced. A fresh start. The thought was sweet. He was tired of the struggle, tired of watching Hank fade away. But the idea felt like a betrayal. Hank won't sell. Never. It's his family's land. "He will if he has no other choice," Dale said, his eyes cold. "We just have to help him see that he has no other choice." 2 days later, Dale and Rusty drove into town. They met Mr. Clay at a small, quiet diner on the outskirts of Billings. He was a man in a clean shirt with neat hair and a calculator watch. "The offer stands," Mr. Clay said, stirring his coffee. "We will pay the amount we discussed for a swift sale of the Miller water rights. Your facilitator's fee will be 10%, paid in cash upon completion." He looked at Rusty. "You are both in agreement?" Rusty's throat felt dry. He looked at Dale, who gave a firm nod. "We're in agreement," Dale said for both of them. "Good," Mr. Clay said. "Time is of the essence. The dry season is only intensifying. We need to secure the rights before the state considers emergency measures. How do you plan to encourage Mr. Miller?" Dale leaned forward. "He's hanging on by a thread. One last push. The main irrigation pump for the home fields is old. If it were to break down for good, that's the last working water on the whole place. He'd have to admit it's over. Mr. Clay showed no emotion. I see. And you can ensure this breakdown? We can, Dale said. Rusty stared at his folded hands on the table. He did not say yes, but he did not say no. The moon was high that night when the two men walked out to the pump house. It was a small metal shed near the empty irrigation ditch. The pump inside was old, its motor humming a tired song. Dale carried a large wrench. We just make it look like a stress fracture. The heat, the old parts. It's believable. Dale, Rusty whispered, his heart pounding. This is too much. It's just a machine, Rusty. A machine on a dead piece of land. We're doing him a favor, pushing him toward the money he needs. Dale opened the shed door. The humming grew louder. Now you hold the light. Keep it steady. Rusty's hand shook as he pointed the flashlight. The beam wobbled over the old pump. He thought of Caleb's face, of the boy teaching that scared horse to trust. He thought of Hank's slumped shoulders on the porch. Dale positioned the wrench. He didn't aim for a loose bolt. He aimed for the main housing, at a critical seam. He took a heavy practice swing. The sound was a sharp crack, followed by a terrible grinding shriek. The hum of the motor choked, sputtered, and died into a thick, ringing silence. Black oil began to seep from the new deep crack in the pump's casing. Dale stepped back, wiping his hands. See, now it's an accident. A tragedy. He looked at Rusty's pale face in the flashlight glow. Don't go soft on me now. This is for us. Tomorrow, Hank sees there's no water left at all. Tomorrow, he finally gives up. And then we all get paid. The first light of morning found Rusty already standing on the front porch. He hadn't slept. The sound of the pump breaking played over and over in his head. He heard the door open behind him. Hank stepped out, buttoning his shirt. He nodded at Rusty, his eyes still clouded with sleep. Morning. Gonna check the south fence line today. Boss, Rusty said, the words sticking in his dry throat. You need to come to the pump house first. Hank paused. Why? It was running fine last night. Rusty couldn't meet his eyes. He looked at his boots. Something's wrong. You should see it. A frown creased Hank's forehead. He followed Rusty off the porch and across the brittle grass. The silence between them felt heavy. As they got closer, Hank stopped walking. I don't hear it, he said quietly. The pump house was silent. No steady hum. No sound of water moving. Hank walked faster. He pulled open the metal door. The smell of hot metal and burnt oil hit them. There, in the gray morning light, was the pump. A dark, jagged crack split its main housing. Black oil had pooled on the concrete floor beneath it. It was not a loose bolt or a worn belt. It was a heart, broken open. Hank did not speak. He did not move. He just stared. I found it like this, Rusty mumbled to the ground. Must have been the heat. The old metal finally gave way. Hank kneeled down. He touched the edge of the crack with his fingers. They came away smudged with oil. He looked at the dead machine, then at his stained fingers, then back at the machine. He stood up slowly. He walked out of the pump house. He did not look at Rusty. He walked past the empty irrigation ditch, past the barn, and up the steps to the house. He sat down in the wooden porch chair, the one that faced the fields. He sat perfectly still. Caleb came out an hour later. He had already fed Thunder. He saw his father sitting on the porch, which was strange. His father was always moving, always working, even when there was no work left to do. Dad? Hank did not answer. He stared at the land. Dad, what's wrong? The pump is dead, Hank said. His voice was flat, empty of all feeling. The main pump, it's cracked open. Caleb felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Can we fix it? No. Can we get a new one? Hank let out a short breath that was not a laugh. With what, Caleb? There is no money. There is no water. The land is done. He finally looked at his son, and his eyes were hollow. I am done. Caleb had never heard those words before. He had seen his father tired, angry, sad, but never empty. It scared him more than anything. We can think of something, Caleb said, his voice firm. We can try. You try, Hank said, turning his gaze back to the fields. I have nothing left to try with. Caleb stood there for a minute, waiting for his father to say more. He didn't. It was like the man had left his body sitting in the chair. Caleb turned and walked toward the barn. His mind was racing. They needed water. There had to be a way. He slid the barn door open. Thunder stood in his stall, calm now, and nickered softly when he saw him. Caleb leaned his forehead against the horse's neck. "He's given up," he whispered. "What do we do?" Thunder just breathed steadily, a solid presence. Caleb thought of his mother. When things felt impossible, she would say, "When you don't know the answer, look in a place you haven't looked yet." She kept old things, books, papers, boxes of memories up in the barn loft. He had not looked there. He walked to the back of the barn where the ladder was nailed to the wall. He climbed up into the loft. It was hot and full of floating dust, old furniture covered in sheets, crates labeled in his grandfather's handwriting. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. He just started opening boxes, moving slowly through the quiet, dusty heat. He was looking for an idea, for a sign, for anything that could bring water back to his father's eyes. The air in the loft was thick and still. Dust floated in the thin shafts of light coming through the cracks in the wall. Caleb opened another crate. It was full of his mother's old books. He ran his fingers over their spines, feeling a pang of sadness. He opened one. It was about animal tracks. Another was about rocks and soil. She loved to understand how things worked. Under the books, his fingers touched something rough. It was a roll of thick paper tied with a faded blue ribbon. He carefully lifted it out. He sat down on the dusty floorboards and untied the ribbon. The paper was brittle and yellow at the edges. He unrolled it. It was a map, drawn by hand in black ink. At the top, in careful cursive, it said, * Miller Homestead, for my son, Hank. It was his grandfather's writing. The map showed their farm's boundaries, the main house, the barn, the creek beds, all dry now. Caleb's eyes scanned the familiar shapes. Then he saw something he did not know. On the far western edge of their land, past the last grazing field, was a place marked with an X. Next to it, in smaller letters, were the words * Lone Pine Gulch, possible spring, tested summer of 1947, water sweet. Caleb's heart beat faster. He traced the line from their house to the X. It was a long way, a place he had never been. A spring, water underground. He rolled the map back up with trembling hands. He climbed down the ladder so fast he almost slipped. He ran across the yard, the paper tight in his fist. His father was still in the porch chair, sitting in the same position. "Dad." Hank did not look up. "Dad, look." Caleb unrolled the map in front of him, pointing at the X. "I found this in Grandpa's things. It says there's a spring at Lone Pine Gulch." He tested it. There was water. Hank's eyes moved slowly from the dry fields to the paper. He looked at the old drawing. He looked at his father's handwriting. A flicker of something passed over his face. A memory, maybe. Then it was gone, replaced by a deep tiredness. "That's a fairy tale, Caleb." "It's not. It's a map. Grandpa wrote it." "My father was a dreamer," Hank said, his voice low. "He was always looking for shortcuts, for miracles in the dirt. He dug a dozen holes out there. He found damp mud once. He called it a spring. It was nothing. But he wrote it down," Caleb insisted. "He wouldn't write it down if it was nothing." Hank shook his head. He looked at his son's eager, dirty face. "That map is older than you are. If there was water there, it's been dry for 2 decades. The drought would have killed it 100 times over." "We have to look," Caleb said. "We have to try. It's the only idea we have." "Trying is what got us here," Hank said, the sudden anger making Caleb step back. "Trying and failing, hoping and being wrong. That map is just paper, Caleb. It's not water. You can't drink hope." The words were like a slap. Caleb stood straight, clutching the map to his chest. He looked at his father, who had given up. He thought of his mother, who would have looked. "Then I'll go look," Caleb said quietly. Hank let out a bitter sigh. "It's a full day's walk one way, through rough country, rattlesnakes, nowhere to get shade. It's a fool's trip." "I'm taking Thunder," Caleb said, as if that settled it. "That horse?" Hank almost laughed, but it had no joy. "He'll spook at a prairie dog hole. You'll be lost and on foot by noon." "He won't spook with me," Caleb said, with a certainty that silenced his father. "And I won't get lost. I have the map." Father and son stared at each other. Hank saw Sarah's stubborn light in the boy's eyes. It was the same light that had believed in him once. It hurt to see it now, pointed at a useless old piece of paper. Do what you want, Hank said, turning his face away. I'm not spending my last days chasing my father's ghosts, and I'm not coming to find you when you get yourself turned around out there. Caleb didn't answer. He just rolled the map up carefully. He walked back to the barn. He had a direction now. He had a place to go. It didn't matter if his father believed in it. He had to. It was the only thread of hope left, and he would not let go. The land west of the farm was different. It was not fields, but open range, broken by dry washes and rocky outcrops. Caleb walked, the old map held in his hand. Thunder followed a few steps behind, a canvas bag of supplies slung over his back. Caleb checked the map often. The big rock that looks like a bear's head, he muttered, squinting at a formation in the distance. That's what Grandpa wrote. Then we turned north. The sun climbed higher. The heat came up from the ground in waves. Caleb's shirt stuck to his back. He took a small sip from his canteen. He poured a little water into his hat and let Thunder drink from it. Not much, Caleb said to the horse. We have to save it. They walked in silence for a long time. The only sounds were their footsteps on the dry earth and the buzz of insects. The emptiness was huge. It made Caleb feel very small, but also focused. There was only the map, the next landmark, and the horse beside him. He was looking at the map again when Thunder stopped walking. The horse made a low sound in his throat. Caleb looked up. 10 feet ahead, coiled on a flat rock in the shade of a scrub brush, was a rattlesnake. Its tail was up, buzzing a sharp, angry warning. Caleb froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had seen rattlesnakes before, but never this close on open ground. Easy, Thunder, he whispered, though the horse was already still. Easy. The snake's head was raised, its tongue flicking. The buzzing filled the air. Caleb knew not to run. Running could make it strike. He took a very slow step backward, then another. Thunder moved with him, carefully placing each hoof. The horse's eyes were fixed on the snake, but he did not panic. He did not snort or pull. He just stayed with Caleb. They backed away until 20 feet of dry ground lay between them and the rock. The buzzing stopped. The snake lowered its head, still watching them. Caleb let out a shaky breath. He put a hand on Thunder's sweaty neck. Good boy. You saw it first. You're a good lookout. They gave the rock a wide berth and continued on. The incident changed the silence between them. It was no longer just a boy leading a horse. It was a partnership. They were watching out for each other. By mid-afternoon, the sky changed. The hard blue faded to a hazy yellow at the horizon. The wind, which had been still, began to pick up. It was a hot, gritty wind. Caleb looked at the map. Lone Pine Gulch was still a long way off. He looked at the strange sky. We should keep going, he said, more to himself than to Thunder. The wind grew stronger. It began to moan across the open land. Sand and dirt skittered over the ground, stinging Caleb's ankles. He pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth. Then he saw it, a dark rolling line on the horizon. It was not clouds. It was a wall of reddish-brown dirt, churning and coming toward them fast. A dust storm. Fear shot through Caleb. He had heard stories. He'd seen small ones from the porch. This was big. Thunder! He shouted over the wind. The horse's ears were pinned back, his eyes wide, but he did not bolt. There was no shelter, no trees, no rocks big enough. Just flat, open land. The wall of dust hit them. The world vanished into a roaring, howling brown darkness. Grit blasted every piece of exposed skin. Caleb could not see his own hand in front of his face. He dropped to his knees, curling into a ball, covering his head. He felt a heavy, warm weight press against his side. A large body leaned over him, shielding him from the worst of the wind. It was Thunder. The horse had positioned himself between Caleb and the storm's direction. He stood with his head down, his body a wall. Caleb wrapped his arms around the horse's front leg. He buried his face against Thunder's coat. The world was chaos, deafening noise, choking dust, terrifying blindness. But here, in this small space, there was a steady heartbeat and solid warmth. "Hold on, boy," Caleb choked out, his words lost in the roar. "Just hold on." The storm seemed to last for hours. It was probably only minutes. The grit found its way into everything, his eyes and his teeth, his clothes. Thunder never moved. He never tried to run. He just stood, taking the punishment, making a pocket of safety for the boy. Slowly, the roar began to fade. The wind lost its fury. The thick brown air thinned to a haze, then to a fog of floating dust. Light returned. Caleb raised his head. He was covered in a fine layer of red dirt. Thunder was the color of rust, his coat caked with it. The land around them was scoured clean in strange patterns. Caleb stood up, his legs wobbly. He looked at Thunder. The horse blew out a great breath, sending a cloud of dust from his nostrils. He looked tired but calm. He nudged Caleb's shoulder with his nose, as if checking if he was all right. "You stayed," Caleb said, his voice full of wonder. He threw his arms around Thunder's neck. "You could have run, but you stayed with me." Thunder rested his head on Caleb's shoulder, just like he had on that first day. They stood together in the settling dust, the only two beings in a vast, silent, cleaned world. The gulch was still far away, but Caleb knew with a certainty that went bone deep that he was not alone. Whatever they found, they would face it together. The dust settled around them like a fine red snow. Caleb coughed, spitting grit from his mouth. He blinked his stinging eyes. Thunder stood patiently, covered head to hoof in the same red powder. "We're a mess," Caleb said, his voice raspy. He took the bandana from his face and shook it out. He reached for the canteen, but it was almost empty. He took a tiny sip, just enough to wet his tongue. Then he poured the last few drops into his palm and let Thunder lick them. "We need to find that water," Caleb whispered. First, they had to clean up. Caleb took a stiff brush from the supply bag. He started on Thunder's neck, brushing in long strokes. Clouds of red dust puffed into the air with each pass. The horse stood still, his head low, enjoying the attention. Caleb worked his way down the strong neck, over the shoulders. The dust was caked thick. He brushed harder, moving toward the flank, the area where a horse's coat often grew in a different pattern. His brush snagged on something. Not a tangle of hair, but a patch where the skin felt different underneath. Caleb stopped. He leaned closer, using his fingers to part the damp, matted hair. There, etched into Thunder's skin, were marks. Old marks, faded to pale pink against the darker hide. They were not scars from an accident. They were deliberate. They were brands. Caleb's breath caught. He knew what these were. Every kid in Montana knew the brand of the Diamond Rock Ranch. It was a famous spread, known for miles around. They didn't raise beef cattle. They raised bucking horses for the professional rodeo circuit. They bred athletes, champions. The brand was there, partially hidden by newer hair growth. And next to it, another, smaller mark, a number, burned into the skin long ago. Caleb's hands trembled. He stepped back, looking at Thunder with new eyes. The sharp ribs he'd first seen weren't from being weak. They were from being worked down to nothing. The flinching at ropes wasn't fear of the tool, but of the pain that came with it. The fear of raised hands wasn't general nervousness. It was the memory of handlers who used force, who demanded performance until a body broke. "This whole time," Caleb said, his voice full of awe, "you weren't scared of work. You were scared of them asterisk." Thunder turned his head to look at Caleb. His large, dark eye was calm. He blew a soft, warm breath. All the pieces fit together in Caleb's mind. The horse's natural strength, his incredible stamina on the long walk, his calmness with the snake, his solid bravery in the storm. This was no ordinary animal. This was a creature that had been pushed to the very limit of endurance, a champion who had given everything he had until there was nothing left to give. He hadn't collapsed from weakness. His spirit had been crushed by cruelty. And when he was broken, they cast him aside. They sold him for pennies at a sale yard, a used-up thing. But Thunder had made a choice. Faced with a boy who offered quiet words and gentle hands, he had chosen to be gentle in return. He had chosen to protect instead of fight. His strength was still there, immense and powerful, but he was using it differently now. Caleb felt a firelight inside his chest. It wasn't anger, though anger was part of it. It was a fierce, blazing certainty. They had all been wrong. His father, Dale, Rusty, the man at the sale yard. They saw only what was on the surface, a skinny, scared creature. Caleb saw the truth. He saw a heart that had been trampled but hadn't turned mean. He saw strength that had been buried but not destroyed. He wrapped his arms around Thunder's neck, burying his face in the now cleaner coat. "They didn't know you," he said, "but I do, and we're not done. We're going to find that water. Then we're going to show everyone what you really are." Thunder nudged him gently, as if agreeing. Caleb picked up the brush with a new determination. He finished cleaning the horse, his touch even more tender. He folded the map and put it back in his pocket. He looked toward the west, where Lone Pine Gulch waited. The sun was beginning to sink, painting the sky in colors of orange and purple. They had been through a storm. They had uncovered a hidden past. Now they had a purpose that felt bigger than just finding water. It was about proving that what others threw away had unimaginable value. "Come on, Thunder," Caleb said, pointing toward a distant line of shadows that might be the gulch. "Let's go finish this." The horse fell into step beside him, not behind him. They walked side by side into the fading light, two survivors headed toward a hope that no one else believed in. The porch board creaked under Rusty's boot. Hank sat in the same chair, staring at the same dry fields. He had not moved for hours. A cold cup of coffee sat on the railing beside him. Rusty cleared his throat. "Hank." No answer. I need to say something." Hank's eyes flicked toward him, then back to the fields. They were empty of any feeling. "If it's about leaving, just go. Ain't no pay for you here." "It ain't about leaving," Rusty said. His hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets. "It's about the pump." Now Hank looked at him. A slow, tired turn of his head. Rusty's words tumbled out in a low, rushed whisper. "It weren't no accident. The pump. Dale and me. We broke it. On purpose. We made it look like it just gave out." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Hank's face did not change at first. Then, very slowly, a dark redness began to climb up his neck. His hands, which had been limp on the arms of the chair, tightened into fists. "Why?" The word was a rough crack. "To make you give up," Rusty said, his voice breaking. "To make you sell. There's a man from AgriWest. They want to buy the water rights. Dale made a deal. They'd pay us a cut to convince you. We thought if the water was all gone, you'd have to say yes." Hank stood up. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he seemed to fill the whole porch. The emptiness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fire that made Rusty step back. "You sold my water," Hank said, each word precise and cold. "You broke my land's last breath. For money." "It's dying anyway, Hank," Rusty pleaded, tears in his eyes. "I was scared. I got nothing saved. It was a way out." "My boy is out there," Hank roared, the sound tearing from his throat. He pointed a trembling finger toward the vast west. "He's out there right now, starving and thirsting, looking for a miracle because you stole his last drop of hope. You were supposed to be his friend." Rusty crumpled. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Hank." He covered his face with his hands. "Where's Dale?" Hank's voice was deadly quiet now. "In the equipment shed. He's waiting for a call from the AgriWest man." Hank stepped off the porch. He walked across the yard with a speed and purpose Rusty hadn't seen in months. Rusty scrambled after him. "Hank, don't. He's mean when he's cornered." Hank did not listen. He shoved open the door of the equipment shed. Dale was inside, leaning against the workbench, looking at his phone. He looked up, a smirk starting on his face. "Hey, boss. You finally come to your senses?" Hank crossed the space between them in 3 strides. He did not yell. He did not ask questions. He grabbed the front of Dale's shirt and slammed him against the wall of tools. Wrenches and pliers clattered to the floor. "You broke my pump," Hank said, his face inches from Dale's. Dale's smirk vanished. He shoved Hank back. "Yeah, I did. I did you a favor. I'm ending the misery. That boy of yours is gonna thank me when he's got cash in his pocket instead of dust." Hank swung. His fist connected with Dale's jaw with a solid crack. Dale stumbled back, more surprised than hurt. Then his own anger ignited. He lunged forward, tackling Hank around the middle. They crashed out through the open shed door and into the dusty yard, a tangle of fists and grunts. Rusty stood nearby, wringing his hands, crying out, "Stop it! Both of you, stop!" But they were beyond listening. Months of drought, of despair, of betrayal, all came out in raw, clumsy violence. Dust clouded around them as they rolled and struggled. Dale was heavier, stronger. He got on top of Hank, pinning him. He drew his fist back. A voice cut through the grunts and the dust. "Dad!" Both men froze. Dale, fist in the air. Hank on the ground beneath him. They turned their heads. At the edge of the yard, covered in a fine layer of red dust, stood Caleb. He was exhausted, his clothes filthy, his hair matted with sweat, but his eyes were blazing. Beside him, solid and calm, stood Thunder. The horse's head was high, his eyes watching everything. Caleb took a step forward. "Let him go." Dale slowly lowered his fist. He got off of Hank, his eyes locked on Caleb. Hank scrambled to his feet, breathing hard, his face smeared with dirt and blood. "You're back," Hank said, his voice ragged. He was looking at his son, really looking, for the first time in days. Caleb didn't look at Dale. He kept his eyes on his father. "I found it." Hank wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Found what?" "The spring," Caleb said. A small, tired smile touched his lips. "At Lone Pine Gulch, just like Grandpa's map said. It's not big, but it's water. It's real." The words hung in the dusty air. Hank stared. He saw the absolute certainty in his son's eyes. He saw the dust of a long journey covering him. This wasn't a boy dreaming. This was a boy who had seen something. Dale barked a harsh laugh. "A spring? You dragged that bag of bones across the county for a trickle in a ditch? You're as crazy as your old man." Hank turned his head. He looked at Dale. All the rage was still there, but it was cold now and sharp. "You're fired, Dale. Get off my land." Dale's smirk faded. "You can't fire me. You can't even pay me." "I own the dirt you're standing on," Hank said, his voice low and steady. "And I am telling you to get off of it. Now, take nothing that isn't yours. If I see you here after today, I will call the sheriff and tell him everything. About the pump, about the deal with AgriWest. You understand?" Dale's face twisted with anger. He looked from Hank to Caleb to Rusty, who stood silent and ashamed. He had no cards left to play. He spat on the ground near Hank's boots. "You're a fool, Miller. That water won't save you. This place is a tomb." He turned and stalked toward the old bunkhouse to get his things. Hank watched him go. Then he looked at Rusty. The older man flinched under his gaze. "You knew," Hank said. "You broke my property. You lied to my face." "I did," Rusty whispered, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on his face. "And I told you the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'll go pack." "Wait," Caleb said. Both men looked at him. Caleb's hand rested on Thunder's neck. "He told you the truth," Caleb said to his father. "When he didn't have to, he came and told you." Hank's jaw worked. He looked at Rusty, who had taught Caleb to fish, who had fixed his toys when they broke. The betrayal was a deep cut, but the confession, that was something. "You stay," Hank said finally, the words costing him. "But you're on the last chance I will ever give you. You work for free until I say different. You look me in the eye every day. You understand?" Relief and shame flooded Rusty's face. He nodded, unable to speak. Hank turned back to Caleb. He walked over to his son. He put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. It was a rough, calloused hand, but the touch was gentle. "You're sure? About the water?" "I saw it," Caleb said. "I touched it. It's cool and it's clean. It comes right out of the rock at the base of the gulch." A light was coming back into Hank's eyes. It was small, like the first star at twilight. "Show me," he said. They went together, the three of them and the horse. Hank drove the old truck as far as the rough track would allow. Then they walked. Caleb led the way, retracing his steps from the day before. When they reached Lone Pine Gulch, the sun was setting. The shadows were long. Caleb pointed to a dark seam in the rock wall. "There." Hank kneeled down. He pushed aside some dry brush. He saw it. A damp, dark stain on the stone, and in its center a steady bead of water welled up. It gathered for a moment, then dropped with a soft asterisk plink asterisk into a small, clear pool no bigger than a coffee cup. The pool overflowed, creating a tiny, shiny trickle that ran a few feet before disappearing into the thirsty ground. Hank reached out. He put his fingers in the pool. The water was cold. He brought his wet fingers to his lips. It was the sweetest thing he had tasted in 2 years. He looked up at Caleb. His son was watching him, waiting. Hank stood up. He pulled Caleb to him in a rough, tight hug. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. When he let go, he looked at the trickle, then at the vast, dry land. "It's a start," he said, his voice thick. "It's a place to start." Rusty was looking at the water too, a look of wonder on his face. "We can dig it out, channel it. Maybe we can store it, slow it down." Hank nodded. He was thinking, planning, for the first time in months. "We'll need piping, a small tank. We'll have to be careful, not take more than it gives." He put his hand back on Caleb's shoulder. "You did this." "We did," Caleb said, looking at Thunder. The horse lowered his head to sniff the damp earth. They stood there as the last light faded, listening to the quiet, miraculous sound of water falling on stone. It was not enough to fill an irrigation ditch. It was not enough to end a drought. But it was a heartbeat, and where there is a heartbeat, there is life. 2 weeks after they found the spring, the wind changed. It came from the east, hot and dry, but it carried a new smell: smoke. Hank stood on the porch, sniffing the air. His eyes scanned the horizon. A faint, dirty brown haze smudged the sky miles away. Rusty's old truck came bouncing up the drive. He skidded to a stop and jumped out, his face pale. "It's the Larson place. Their whole back 40 is on fire. The fire department is on the other side of the county. The wind, it's pushing it this way, Hank." Caleb came out of the barn, Thunder beside him. "What's wrong?" "Wildfire," Hank said, his voice tight. "Moving fast. We need a fire break. A big line of dirt between our land and where that fire is burning." "The tractor," Caleb said immediately. "We can use the disc plow." They ran to the equipment shed. Hank went straight to the old green tractor. He turned the key. It cranked but did not start. He popped the hood. He stared inside. "The fuel pump assembly," Hank said, his voice hollow. "It's gone. The whole unit is ripped out." Rusty leaned in to look. "Dale. He must have taken it for spite when he left." Hank slammed the hood down. The sound was final. "We can't plow without it. We can't make a break." They stood in silence for a moment. The smell of smoke grew stronger. "What about horses?" Caleb asked. "We don't have a draft team," Hank said. "Just riding horses. They can't pull that heavy steel. It takes real power." Caleb turned and looked at Thunder. The horse was watching them, his ears forward, sensing the tension. Caleb thought of the hidden brands. He thought of the massive strength in the horse's shoulders, the power he had chosen not to use. "Thunder can," Caleb said. Hank shook his head. "Caleb, no. That plow weighs more than your truck. It's not about willingness. It's about raw strength." "He has it, Dad," Caleb insisted, his voice urgent. "You didn't see him in the storm. You didn't see the marks under his coat. He's stronger than any horse we've ever had. He just needs to know why." Hank looked from his son's desperate face to the distant smoke. He had no other choice. It was trust the horse or lose everything. "Get the harness," Hank said to Rusty. "The heavy one from the back. Caleb, you talk to him. He listens to you." They worked quickly. Rusty dragged out the old heavy horse collar and the thick leather traces. Hank hitched the heavy disc plow to the back of Rusty's truck and pulled it out to the field's edge, where the fire would come. Thunder watched the harness come near. He saw the leather straps. He remembered. His breathing got faster. He took a step back, his eyes showing white. Caleb stepped in front of him. He put his hands on either side of Thunder's face. "Look at me. Only at me. This isn't for them. This is for us. For our home. You can do this. I know you can." He held Thunder's gaze, speaking softly and steadily. Slowly, the horse's breathing eased. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against Caleb's. With Caleb guiding him, they put on the collar. They fastened the straps. Thunder trembled but did not bolt. Hank attached the traces to the plow. The weight of the plow settled into the harness. Thunder felt the immense pull. He braced his legs. For a second he froze, memories of unbearable strain flooding back. "Now, Thunder," Caleb said, walking beside him. "Pull for me. Pull for us." Thunder leaned forward. The muscles in his shoulders and chest bunched and tightened. The leather traces went straight and stiff. The heavy steel plow resisted, then shuddered. With a groan of metal, it began to move. A first shallow cut opened in the earth. A tear cut through the dirt on Caleb's cheek. He walked beside his horse, whispering, "Yes, that's it. Just like that." Hank and Rusty watched, stunned, as the boy and the horse began to cut a long, deep scar across the field. The plow bit deep, turning over dry soil, creating a barren line. Down the road, their neighbor, Mr. Peterson, saw them. He stopped his truck. He got out with a shovel. Then his two sons got out with more shovels. They started widening the trench. Another neighbor saw, then another. They came with shovels and hose. They joined the line. Rusty grabbed a shovel and jumped in, digging with a furious energy. No one spoke much. There was only the sound of the plow, the shovels, and the growing roar of the approaching fire. The sky turned orange with its light. Thunder pulled. He did not stop. Sweat lathered his coat, but his steps never faltered. Caleb stayed right with him, his voice a constant, steady sound. They finished a line 300 yards long just as the first burning embers began to fall from the sky like terrible rain. The fire reached the other side of the trench. It roared, hungry for the dry grass on the Miller farm, but it found only bare, turned earth. It had nothing to burn. It crackled and searched and began to die. The neighbors let out a cheer, a tired, smoky sound. Thunder finally stopped. His sides heaved. Caleb unhooked him from the plow and led him to a clean spot. He poured cool water over the horse's back. Hank walked over. He looked at Thunder, then at his son. He put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You were right," Hank said, "about everything." Caleb nodded, too exhausted to speak. Hank looked at the saved land, at the tired neighbors, at the horse that had done the impossible. The brittle pride in his chest had finally broken, but it was replaced by something stronger. It was not about never needing help. It was about what you built with the help you were given. The farm was saved. The spring was flowing. His family was still here. It was enough. It was more than enough.